that this event took place before the Second World War, but let's put aside whether this event can be retrospectively interpreted as a genocide or not. The Ottoman Empire enacted the relocation and resettlement law, and that's how the Armenians have been relocated. So through that law, I wonder whether we can define this issue as a genocide or not. We can assess whether physical and psychological torture have been inflicted or not. And I can ask the question whether this group of people have been prevented from making children and reproducing themselves, or whether their kids have been given to some other ethnicities. I mean, these are the conditions for defining an event as a genocide. And as we take those criteria into consideration, the groups who claim that it is not a genocide, like us, says that Armenians have not been relocated because they were the Christians, or they hadn't been relocated as they are the Armenians. As you know, in the last parliament, there was 33 MPs, deputies in the Ottoman parliament, and they, worked in different positions in the army, and they were not relocated as well. So we can come to the conclusion that no method opted by the Nazi Germany against the Jewish people have been opted for by the Ottoman Empire. Of course, some Armenians have lost their lives, we cannot deny it, but we have to underline once again, and we have to ask this question, whether such an attitude towards the Armenian, which can inflict hatred, is present or not. After 1878, after the Berlin Agreement, legal and illegal organizations like Karahach, the Black Cross, whether they have been incited as an organization to be hatred or not. So we should also ask the question whether the Armenians attacked only the Turks. I mean, in the Russian consulate secret reports, in the one consulate, Russian consulate secret reports, we have seen that the Armenian gangs, for example, threatened the Armenian churches through raids and murdered the Armenians who refused to pay the money to them. So if we speak about the hatred, is it a hatred against the Turks only? I mean, if this is the case, then most probably the Armenians hated the Armenian gangs. Well, we can also ask this question whether there was an event which can lead to a physical collapse among the Armenians. So first of all, we should ask this question whether the people who have been relocated under the relocation and resettlement law could be subject to a physical collapse or not. We have seen that those groups which can actually present a threat for the security of the state can be relocated. This is a right arising out of the, for example, the law. I mean, the United States of America actually have sent the Japanese who didn't rebel against the government, by the way, and they have been sent to the Pacific coast without letting them to take their belongings with them. And many people have lost their lives. And when I said this to their consultants, they say that the situation between Japanese and the Armenians were not the same. Armenians, for example, rebelled against the state, And he said that the Japanese were innocent with comparison to the Armenians. That's what the Americans said with their own mouth. So the Armenians rebelled against the government in 23 different provinces. And one of the main reasons why the government relocated the Armenians, which is also confirmed by Justin McCarty, is that the provinces where there were uprisings and rebellions were the strategic places where the telegraph communication was present, and those telegraph communication lines have been sabotaged by the Armenians. That's why it seems quite natural for the Ottoman state to relocate the Armenians from that province to other lands. And the Armenians are asking the question why the civilians are being relocated as well, because I mean, since you cannot get rid of the Armenian gangs in the region, and since they were constituting a threat, that was the reason why the Armenian civilians have been relocated as well. And for the adults, 60 Turkish lira, and for the minors, 20 Turkish liras have been given to the relocated people as an allowance. And at the same time, international humanitarian aid organizations are allowed to help them. And wherever they go, the churches were founded in order to enable them to worship. So if you take all those issues into consideration, we see the lack of an intention of physically cleansing those people. According to the Dixon statements, the Middle East humanitarian organization is spending certain amount of money. It is all clear. In Deir ez-Zor, for example, 300,000 Armenians were relocated according to them. And by the way, the Armenians didn't live in deserts or in the peripheries. They lived in the epicenter of the province because the churches also founded them. I went to Raqqa and I visited different provinces in Aleppo, in Hama, in Humus. It was stated that the Armenians were living after the relocation, and I have seen where they lived, and they are not evicted to the deserts. And all of those places are the places where the Euphrates River is passing by. It's an oasis, actually. So indeed, first of all, we should define how we will assess the situation. We have founded an Armenian research center in the Turkish Historical Society. Our colleagues went to Iran, Russia, United States of America, and via an Azerbaijani colleague, we had a chance to collect the Iranian archives. And we also screened the Geneva United Nations archives. So the total number of the pages that we have collected is more than 100,000 pages. So rather than assessing this event, whether it was a genocide or not, we had the intention of understanding what really this was. I mean, if this event was a murder, a massacre, or a genocide, it would have been clear already, because although let's assume that people do not trust to the archives of the Ottoman Empire, but the information which are present in the archives of Russia, France, and UK then could be assessed, and that's what we did. We have also screened the archives of the League of Nations in the Geneva, and we have come across with a very interesting document. As of November 1922, the reports are being completed and presented by US and UK. And there are the American versions, and in Geneva, we see the reports in two different languages, in French and English. According to a aforesaid report, the total number of the Armenians have been counted. According to that figures, 3,004,000 Armenians were existed, And 873,000 approximately Armenians have emigrated from Ottoman lands to other places. And 95,000 Armenians converted to Islam, which are not included according to that report. But more strikingly, the Armenians who lived in Istanbul and the Armenians who lived with their Armenian identity in Anatolia. This is very important because if you are speaking about an ethnic cleansing and genocide, then 148,989 Armenians still continue to live in Istanbul, which is a striking fact. And don't you think that it's interesting that many more Armenians still live in Anatolia, and they have given the exact numbers. For example, 13,254 Armenians still live in Ankara. How can we make connections with the genocide then? We don't say that no Armenians have lost their lives, but we should attract your attention to certain interesting figures. There are the Armenians who pretend that they are fleeing the war front, but we should also check why the soldiers are returning back to their homelands. We should understand whether they are fleeing away from the war or whether they are returning back to their homelands because the Armenian gangs are raping, they're raping their families, and that is one of governmental stance against the Armenians. And there is an attack on the Armenian gangs who try to rape their families. And if you read the memoirs of the Anduar, you will see those very clearly. It should be planned in advance. The Ottoman Empire, who waged war in 1914, didn't take the relocation decision. You take a look to the state budget, why there wasn't any chapter regarding to the spendings and expenditures relating to the Armenian relocation in the 1915 March budget. And this item has been added to the budget only after 26th of May. I mean, the relocation of the Armenians have been initiated as of April 18. And by the way, the budgets are being prepared from March to March. As you know, the state budget has been prepared in Turkey until the time of Turgut Özal on the month of March. Only after him, the budgets were started to be prepared as of January. So what I'm trying to say that this item regarding to the expenditures relating to the Armenian relocation was not included in the March budget. And a certain amount of money has been included in the budget for the construction of hospitals and the healthcare spendings of the Armenians relocated. And the money has been dispatched to different provinces in order to be spent for the Armenians. I mean, if you take all those issues into consideration, you see that the relocation is not being planned in advance. On 17th of April in Van and Çatak and Bitlis provinces, due to the Armenian uprisings and rebellions, this relocation had been initiated. I mean, people are speaking about the arrest of 235 people, but more than 1,800 people have been taken under custody. And 180 of those 235 arrests had fled, by the way, and they have been sent to Çankırı and Irish prisons. And as you know, the Ottoman army was fighting to death in Çanakkale, and Ottoman Empire was waging a war in Mosul in Caucasia. But the ones from your own society was collaborating and cooperating with the French and the Englishmen. Grigor Pasha, for example, states that they were fighting by themselves. And according to his memoirs, he stated that the half of the French army was comprised by the Armenians. And in the French archives, we see the Armenians who have lost their lives as they were fighting together with the French. And we see that in the English army, there were 8,000 volunteers, Armenian volunteers. And Grgar Pasha, for example, stated that apart from 150,000 Armenians in the Russian army, 40,000 volunteers have fought for the liberation of the Armenian provinces together with Nazarbekov, chief commander. And he said that it is presented with deepest respect to the excellencies. So there are very similar documents like this. I mean, Kemal Çiçek prepared actually a document regarding to the Musa Mountain Armenians. I mean, such different stories are popping up in those archives. I mean, we have checked the French archives. I mean, the Armenians who went to the Musa Mountain, for example, all of them, I mean, children, women, adults, all of them are being identified from the French nations are being subject to these stories and novels. And I have stated that Turkey should actually shoot a movie about this. I mean, these rebellions and uprisings should be shoot as a movie because huge traumas took place. I mean, everybody is assessing the situation from just one side. They are looking at the one side of the medallion. I mean, many Armenians have died. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter even if 8,000 people have lost their lives with a systematic fashion, it is still a genocide. But 518,302 people have been massacred by the Armenians. And these actually massacres took place before the relocation decision has been taken. I mean, 128,000 Muslims have been murdered by the Armenians, according to the Ottoman and the Russian archives. And I have received those, for example, documents from the Russian archives. As a result, we have the chance to assess the situation from different perspectives. And we should assess the situation somehow differently. I mean, France, Russia, and UK, the Allied forces. I mean, what kind of a political plan did they have against the Ottoman Empire? We should never forget that. It's highly important. I wish I could show the pictures, I mean, via a PowerPoint presentation, but I couldn't prepare it. But take a look at this map. And you will see the Armenia, which is being designed. It's a great Armenia extending all the way to the Klike region. And don't you think that since this was the plan, don't you think that we should check what those states that how many missionaries the Americans have sent to the Ottoman lands, for example? How many people did they teach? Robert College was founded in 1863, for example. The first graduates of the Robert College in 68 was the leading figures for the Bulgarian revolt, and that's why they have raised many militias. So don't you think that it is quite natural that they will claim that the Armenians were massacred for propaganda purposes? I mean, the book of Victorian should be assessed. Moryantsov presented totally different reports from the consulate. Edward Beaton, Mersin consulate, or Aleppo consulate Jackson reports are totally different from the reports of Morgenthau or a report being sent to the Lord Weiss, because in those reports, they were seeking to find excuses in order to legitimize the involvement of USA. And Morgenthau presented the idea that the Christians are actually Armenians as the Christians are being massacred, and they claim that we can even actually shoot a movie about it. And those reports, at the cost of £300, have been reflected in the books of Arnold Toynbee. So don't you think that we should assess those publications with an objective perspective? So those events which took place under the war propaganda at the end of the day also had its reflections by the arrest of those people being sent to Malta by the Englishmen. And since the proof of evidence was lacking, they were released. In France, in Russia, these are accepted as genocide. But why do you think that the United Kingdom doesn't even consider this issue as being a genocide? It is quite understandable because the United Kingdom was directly involved in all those events. So we should take that into consideration. And we stated that, okay, there are the claims that 1.5 million Armenians have been murdered. Even Arnold Toynbee states that 600,000 Armenians have been murdered, and Toynbee stated that 1.1 million Armenians still alive in his book, page 67. Okay, if we say that, if one side of the population is not murdered, so where are they? They are not being thrown to the Euphrates River at the end of the day. During such hot summer times, you cannot carry that much people. Because the deportation and relocation comes to an end before 1916. During the summertime, the dead people will have a bad smell. You have to bury them. Then where they are buried, the Evitas Institute chair in London stated that in Harput, in Elazığ, 17,000 Armenians have been murdered and they have been buried. And I said, okay, let's come together and excavate the graveyards and let's find them, I said. And he said that I couldn't find it. The ones who know the Caspian River should know that there are no enough land to bury 17,000 people. So this is total hypocrisy. So we are obliged to study this topic scientifically as the historians. Our colleagues have wonderful researches. Professor Kemal says that we didn't do enough research about those issues, but I don't agree. We know how many Armenians lost their lives due to the diseases. There are serious studies about those issues. And let me say this as well. It doesn't matter whether we publish those studies in English, in French, in German. I have understood that after I become politician, it doesn't matter what kind of a study that we are carrying out, it is not acceptable for them. Because before the motion for acknowledging the Armenian events as genocide in the European Parliament, I went to the European Parliament and I had a chance to discuss this issue with the political party representatives of each, European countries, and I have handed over them their own archives, not the Ottoman archives, and I said to them, how can you acknowledge it as genocide? And they responded back to me before 15 days of the adoption. They said, I wish you could have come earlier with those documents, they said. There was a lady from the Green Party. I have spoken with her And she said to me, I mean, you are speaking in vain. We already decided that it was a genocide. I mean, can you imagine? I discredited their proofs, and I said to her, I mean, these are the documents, these are the proofs, you cannot overlook them. But she said, it doesn't matter, we have already acknowledged it as a genocide. And I said to her, you are not green, you are the red comrades, I told her, and she was super angry. So, I mean, at the end of the day, they try to find themselves in this map. I mean, without analyzing and understanding why the missionary schools are founded in the Ottoman lands, we cannot expect that the Europeans will have the goodwill. When Turkey was saying that let's found the commission comprised of the historians, no one is interested. When the Biden used the genocide, although it lacks the legal ground, it shows us that Turkey should solve this problem politically. And I struggled a lot for this issue. And I stated that this speech of Biden is subject to the crime of hate. Because without any legal ground, despising on one nation and accusing one nation and making it hostile to other countries is a hate crime. That's why I do believe that Biden should be held in trial, because it was, I mean, his individual choice to acknowledge it as a genocide. And one of the lawyers in the USA stated that it's not a hate crime, but the people from the families of Talat Pasha, Enver Pasha, can actually ask for compensation and indemnification. And according to the European law system and courts, they will receive that indemnification and compensation from Biden, they said. So, I mean, we have understood that we have this strong hand with our documents, with our proofs. I mean, tomorrow, if I don't think that a committee of historians will be ever established, but at the end of the day, what they are trying to accomplish is not to, analyze the realities, but they are just trying to put the blame on someone. Because after all, the historians should check the historical facts, and after checking those historical facts, the historians will understand how the country to whom he is addressing will react. Because right now, I do believe that this issue should be resolved politically. In 2005, in Austria, in Vienna, by the way, I believe I already spoke over my time, so let me finish. In Austria, we have held a meeting together with the Armenians, and we have changed our documents, 100 of our documents. And we have exchanged our documents with the Armenians, but 1 month later, they didn't want to hold the follow-up meetings. And what was the reason? Because they said that if you don't acknowledge the genocide, we will not sit at the same table for discussion with you. So it is not possible for them to discuss those issues in a scientific ground with us. I mean, neither Armenians nor countries whose parliaments have adopted the genocide can discuss with us on a scientific ground. Because if they are discussing with us on a scientific ground, we know what they are going to say. So there are the ones in Turkey who claims that it was a mutual massacre on each side. When you cannot even compare the losses and the casualties of the Armenians and the Turks, it's even 1 to 10 in ratio. So is it whether genocide or not? It is a political issue at the end of the day. Because West is trying to find a topic which it will be using as the sword of Damocles on Turkey. Otherwise, if you discuss those issues on the scientific route, I am certain that no countries will come up with their allegations. That's how I end my speech. Thank you very much. I do believe I would like to yield the floor to Necmettin Alkan right now. Apologies, Necmettin Alkan. I have stolen from your time a little, but I will give you 30 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to each and all of you. I wish that it will be a very fruitful session for all of us. I'm going to speak about how we have approached to the 1915 deportation process. I have followed the previous sessions, and in the afternoon session, Yusuf Bey have mentioned it in detail. Related with this issue, we do have some certain resources and academical studies, and we should not ignore the fact that they are very high in number. For a period of time, I have been in Germany as a historian, as a researcher, and I have got an opportunity to compare and contrast the situation, as Yusuf Bey has just mentioned, beyond being an academical perception, the present condition of the state and also the European science standing point defines the historical facts. 1890s, this Armenian issue was taking the first steps, and 1915, deportation process, and all of the post-events and post-event related discussions are taken into account with non-partite historians with a very positive approach, but some certain states and some certain politicians throughout time have been agitated this issue. And let's go through the objective side. And I will keep my title into consideration, and there are some certain facts to be shared with you. And I'm going to make some assessments, and I'm going to conclude. I hope that this presentation will be published after this event. Armenian issue and social and psychological and political psychological side of this issue will be the main focus of my topic. I have sought for an answer for a question. History is a process, is a progress, and some certain vertical events are taking and horizontal events are taking place. And all the vertical things are very significant. 1915 deportation example, everybody speaks about it, knows about it, but on the horizontal side, when we consider the vertical side as a conclusion, how we have approached this vertical position on the horizontal level, what are the causes and also effect relationship on the horizontal side is essential to be pointed out. And my basic argument, my basic question is as follows: how happened and we have had a 1915 deportation process? Why did we experience such kind of an event? There are 6 subtitles in my presentation, and one of them is the Ottoman Empire's historical progress. In the last 250 years of the empireship, of the administrative structure and the Armenian people do have actually certain contribution. Under this title, the Armenians who were living under the dominance of Ottoman Empire have become a nation. And how did they become a nation under the roof, under the umbrella of Ottoman Empire? It is possible to state that Armenian nation consciousness has appeared as a fact, as a phenomena. And there are some certain factors, but according to me, the major factor is the allowance of Ottoman Empire, the exemptions provided by some rights and also freedoms provided from the Ottoman Empire side. And as a homogeneous structure, under the auspices of Ottoman Empire, they have claimed for becoming an independent nation. And first of all, we need to consider it as a first fact. And I know the German sources, 1915 in deportation process. There aren't any in-depth researches, but related with 1890s about Sultan Abdulhamid period, we do have some certain information. And when we look at the German resources, they state that the Ottoman Empire, starting from 1890s, was not so much problematic as it is being stated by many European politicians and also Armenian side in the economical field, in the social field. They were very effective in administration in 1821 and 1830 during the Mora revolt. They were very effective. So there are some historians who are speaking and telling about those facts. So there is something special about this item. What I would like to give you is Armenian revolt against Ottoman hegemony was not due to exclusion, due to an hegemony and suppression. It is on the contrary, just like the actually minorities situation in European continents, it is doesn't have any similarity because they were allowed to have a national identity. And of course, the most important progress is being taken during the disintegration process of Ottoman Empire times. And also the Balkanian countries, we see the actually hidden organizations against the Ottoman Empire because there were minorities, non-Muslim minorities also present in the Balkanian states and also within the Ottoman Empire itself. And so some committees have been established illegally and they have started to combat against the Ottoman administration. And we see that the Ottoman Empire was very strong in administration as a state. We're not actually having such kind of disorientation, this type of revolts. And when it came to the disintegration process, due to some tax collection processes, due to some certain minor conflicts, we see the appearance of some certain revolting activities until 1915. And we can include Sharif Hussein also in 1960s and 70s. The Ottoman Empire has been involved in a weakness and a problematic situation, and there is a separation process. And the third title is going to be composed of the revolutions in and also against the actually state. We see some risings in Europe against the states in Europe in 1889, French Revolution, and then 1840 and 48. We see some European revolutions and some revolutionary actions are taking place in Europe, throughout Europe as a model, again, getting organized against the administration and also revolting and also owning the idea of liberalism, owning the idea of nationalism. And there are some certain flows and trends and mindsets. And we see that among the Ottoman citizens, it has seen a great interest. And somehow those minority groups inside the Ottoman Empire have taken inspiration and they have started a revolt against the Ottoman Empire. So they have found a model to revolt for themselves from the European side, and those chains of revolutions have brought to the point of 1915 deportation process. 1890s, all of the Anatolian revolutions and risings and the ideological spectrum of the Armenian groups are making use of the European popular tendencies and fashionable trends, actually. And they do have a collaboration with those committees in Europe. And in the fourth level, my approach will be focusing on the missionary activities. Yusuf Bey pointed out this fact in detail, and there are a lot of studies carried on about these issues. When I look at the German resource about 1890s, Abdulhamid times, and Armenian risings, some German resources point out the fact of the impact of those missionary activities, and we look Protestant, actually missionary activists have pushed the Armenian people to revolution and rising against the Ottoman Empire. American and British missionary actions and changing of the religion was not actually shift from one Christian sect to another Christian sect. It was a more anarchist type of actually reaction. It supported the guerrilla-like activities, anarchist-like activities against the state. Another subtitle will be the nationalist revolutions in Balkanian countries. They are the first models, internal models. Whatever was happening in Europe were the external models, and whatever was happening in Serbia, in Bora, and 18,000 in Macedonian regions, for example, all of the revolutionary committees and their actions have had an impact on the Ottoman Empire, on Ottoman geography. One and after, non-Muslim minorities are actually risings, unfortunately, affected the Armenian population within the structure, under the umbrella of Ottoman Empire, and they have found the ground to revolt. Also, the independence of Greek has been a very important milestone, and Armenian people have taken it as an example, and they have revolted against the Ottoman Empire, and they have had the power, they have had the motivation to be independent. And when we look at the Balkanian risings and also the Armenian risings, there is a continuity and there is a resemblance. And my last sixth point will be the competition among Ottoman Empire's heritors, geopolitical calculations, strategic calculations. What I would like to tell here is until from 1890s to 1915s, all of the Armenian events are somehow can be considered as a dramatic event, and it's a progress of risings. It's a progress of revolutions. First of all, Russia, later UK, and as a garnishing country, French was involved, and Germany was a little bit excluded. It's a little bit outside this issue, 1890s. As a result, first of all, Russia, in order to go down to Mediterranean Sea, Balkanian countries, 1878, they have won the Balkanian War, and the Slav countries, after the establishment of independent countries with Ayasofyanos Agreement, started to move towards Anatolia by basing on Ayasofyanos Agreement. They have started to create Armenian state, independent Armenian state. And of course, this was a very important action on the British side. As the 61st article, under the guarantee of 5 states, with so-called reforms, they were aiming to establish an Armenian states. And starting with Berlin Congress, Armenian issue have become to an internal phase. And Russia and UK's competition have been the main reason to empower the Turkish side in 1890s, and Russia's Turkmenistan Agreement and Berlin Congress, and also integration of UK to the process have become something international rather than a national matter, national concern. 1890s, starting from 1890s until 1914s, the month of August, September, and October. On the eastern side, Russia, on the western side, and they have the Armenian support have started direct actions and direct involvements, and is being mentioned in many of the literature. Without Russia and without England, without their inclusion, we cannot speak about deportation. We cannot speak about in the 19th Armenian issues. And 1893, 94, 95, and 96, all of the actually revolts and also rising in the Anatolian regions were taking place with the hands of some Western spies. And of course, all of these rebellious acts have got many contributions, I mean, in quotation, contributions from the foreign countries. In 1915, before the deportation in England, I mean, Britain, UK and Russia the speaker is inaudible to be translated. By the month of August 1914, British and also Russian groups have been involved directly and get in contact with the Armenian side, and they have been involved in a probable war between Armenians and Ottoman Empire. So they do have some communications and networking among the Ottoman Empire. These competitive forces and their tactics and the sense of and the idea, the mindset of sharing should be taken into consideration very seriously. Otherwise, it is not possible to interpret the Armenian issue in 1890s and 1915s efficiently. So this is what I'm going to summarize in 6 titles. How we have approached the 1915. Why did we have such kind of an event? So on the horizontal side, these may be the causes. We can multiply these causes, but I have got half an hour, so I have tried to summarize it as much as I can. As a result, it is possible to state that, yes, deportation is a very bad thing, and neither of the communities should not be forced to migration from their neighborhood, from their land, from their houses. No one would like to have such kind of a thing. Everybody would like to survive in their own environment. This is a richness, this is a cultural richness and a need. But anyhow, in some certain situations, the sultans were coming to a certain level that in order to survive, they're facing with some bottleneck situations, and they were urged to take some strategic decisions. And when they are taking these strategic decisions, what are those strategic decisions? Our professors have mentioned the Yenikköy Agreement, 14th of February, 1914. It is very clear within this agreement that in the European press and in our resources, it is clearly stating that, referring to the Berlin Congress, Armenian issue and the reform issue has been transformed into a totally different picture. Armenian borders going to Trabzon, to Black Sea. If Ottoman Empire did not take this deportation decision, if they were not involved in the World War, in such kind of a situation, these geographies, these lands, we would not be having a Turkish Republic. It would not be possible. It will totally be invaded. We should reconsider this fact. They would not allow us to survive. Sultan Ahmed in 1890s is attending to Berlin Congress and standing against the reform actions. So it was a huge contribution. It is something positive to be taken as a decision. 1915, the deportation decision, despite its negative sides, was something essential to be practiced. 1819's reforms. I have got another evaluation. Let me share it with you. 1990s and 96 and 97, Duaili Muazzamas, ambassadors in Turkey, was continuously suppressing on Sultan. And the Lieberstein, the ambassador of Germany, was coming to Sultan Hamid's palace on Fridays, and he has requested actually meeting with the Sultan, and he's reporting the meeting as follows. I understand Sultan Hamid's concerns. If they apply Berlin, there won't be any Turkey, there won't be any Ottoman Empire remaining in the lands of Anatolia. So the German ambassador was having the knowledge and expertise to interpret the situation are sometimes better than us. So this concern of survival, the concern of future, starting from 1890 to 1950, and caused the events which have occurred during this time. So similar to these things, we may have some further examples. It was also mentioned in the morning sessions. There are a lot of examples. And all of the deportation examples of the European countries are so obvious. And since they are so much obvious and have been recorded in the history, only naming the Armenian deportation as a blame is something actually unfortunate. And it is so much related with the lacking amount of historical documentation. And I would like to thank you for your patience, and I would like to wish success to my other colleagues.
Thank you very much, Necmettin. It was a wonderful interpretation. I totally agree with your interpretation of Armenians managed by two different governors. I do believe this is one of the reasons why the Ottoman Empire waged First World War. As you know, the governors went to their own provinces, but it was not initiated. So as the Ottoman Empire waged war, I mean, this issue of two governorate has ceased to exist. So it's an interesting example on our side, of course. In the Russian Secret Intelligence report, it is stated that the impact and the influence of the Frenchmen and the Englishmen are so high on the Armenians, they say. If we don't support the Armenians, most probably we won't have any influence when the Ottoman lands are being partitioned. So we should also take those into consideration. All right. Michael Günther is not with us. I mean, I do believe we are 22 people, but I'm not sure whether he is with us. If Michael is with us, I will give the floor to him, but I don't see him. Okay, let's continue with the other speaker so he can come much later. Let me give the floor to Haluk. And if the Michael arrives, he can take the floor. Of course, I will give the floor to Michael after Haluk. Haluk, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, dear professor. First and foremost, Director of Sabahattin Zaim University, I would like to thank him for organizing such a symposium. I'd like to thank Mr. Tarık and Beytullah for their endeavors and first and foremost for their kind invitation. For 2 consecutive days, there were wonderful discussions, and I also would like to contribute to this discussion as well. And when such a symposium offer arrive, I would like to make a presentation about a topic that I have been working on. And I was focusing on the Tashnak and Hinchak committees, which was initiated during the second term of the constitutional legitimacy. But as we see that Hınçak and Taşnak committees have organized many congresses, and I will be focusing on the decisions coming out of those congresses. And I will try to assess those decisions based on the so-called genocide regarding to Taşnak and Hınçak committees. Other than certain superficial master studies, we don't see many PhD studies, unfortunately. We don't see a comprehensive Taşnak and Hınçak committee histories. According to the studies that we have carried out so far, the Ottoman archives and the Armenian authors are being assessed, and those studies are based on the memoirs of the actors of the time. And we are in need of the decision coming out of those Taşnak and Hınçak committees. Of course, the Ottoman archives give us detailed information because the government is following those committee meetings very closely. So my speech will be focusing on that. And I will be focusing on the political groups. And I will take a look at the stance of those political parties in the second constitutional monarchy period. And I will try to assess their relations with Russia during the Balkan Wars. And I will try to understand their stance towards the reforms. And fourth, in 1913, as the roads were separated, I will focus on the self-defense decisions. I mean, when those self-defense decisions are taken by the Armenians, I will be taking a look at them. The allegations are as such that the Progress and Union Party actually protected the Armenians according to the Armenian authors. The first ultimate of the Progress and Union Party members was to make the constitutional monarchy period to survive. On the other hand, the Armenian historians choose certain documents very selectively, and they are using such a selective discourse, and they have a biased approach towards the documents that they are using in their researches, and I will try to exemplify them. As the constitutional monarchy is announced, the 1907 Congress of the Young Turks were really important. The Armenians were also present. Taşnak's and Hınçak committees, those two illegal committees, also sent representatives. Malumyan, as a representatives of the Taşnaks, stated to Talat Pasha that they can work with them. As it is the case in 1912, in this Congress of the Young Turks, consensus couldn't be established. The prince was in favor of decentralization. And that's how they established their relations with the Young Turks for the future. After the constitutional monarchy is announced, this solidarity has been activated as well. In terms of its organization and structure, we see that the Taşnaks are much more stronger. I mean, if we have to scale it out of 100, we can say that, 60 to 70% was the influence of the Taşnaks, and the rest was belonging to Hınçak community. And its name is going to be changed as well, Revolutionary Hınçak Committees, and later on it will turn into a Social and Hınçak Democratic Party. So there are some confusions about the literature, and we should also make use of those terms in our literature. After the constitutional monarchy is being announced, the Hunchaks and Tashnaks have benefited from political pardon and came to Istanbul, and they started working in order to make use of this free environment enabled by the constitutional monarchy. The Ottoman Armenians and Anatolian Armenians until 1913 hated those committee members because these were the illegal parties followed by the Ottoman Empire, and it was claimed that if you are cooperating with them, it is constituting a crime. But after the constitutional monarchy, their rights have been protected by the constitution as well. As a result, they tried to increase their influence on the Anatolian Armenians. Both parties were socialists, by the way, and they were the members of the World Communist Union, by the way. And they were the Russian Armenians, by the way. The wealthy Russian Armenians founded them, and socialist anarchy was a starting point for them. But there was a dilemma. They were also opting for nationalism, and trying to make nationalism and socialist anarchy survive at the same time was the topic discussed in all those congresses. Both in the declarations of the Tashnaks and the Hunchak committees, first, they tried to create an independent Armenia comprised of the lands of Caucasia, Russia, and Ottoman Empire. And they were planning to establish a state of police state together with the Armenians. It was clearly stated in the legislation of the Armenians. They stated that we cannot live under the auspices of a king. I mean, how the socialists can actually enable them to live under a king, just like Greeks and the Bulgarians, because at the end of the day, our ultimate aim is to establish and found an independent Armenia and make this country a part of greater socialism. Under this free environment provided by the constitutional monarchy, both the Hunchaks and Tashnaks opened their own branches. And in 1909, both committees organized their general assemblies in Istanbul. And in those general assemblies, Tashnaks have taken the decision to cooperate with the Progress and Union Party. But as they have taken the decision to cooperate with them, they also intensify their efforts in order to increase the weaponization of all the Armenians. I mean, in 1909, by the way, this decision is taken before any sort of crisis broke out whatsoever. Of course, the tensions were there, but although they were not, de facto tensions and conflicts taking place, the Tashnaks and Hunchaks were intensifying their efforts in order to dispatch the weapons to the Anatolian Armenians. At the beginning, they were their enemies, but in the Anatolian Armenians, they started cooperating with each other so that they can increase their pressures on the Ottoman Empire. When they participated in the elections together, Boyajian, for example, out of 12 MPs, was a member of the Union and Progress Party, and at the same time, the Tashnak Committee. After the Adana events, 1912 Adana events, both committees, Tashnaks and Hunchaks, took the decision to work together under the constitution. This is also important because, the Ottoman government is deemed responsible for the Adana events as committing genocide. But those authors are overlooking the decision taken by the Tashnak and Hunchak committees taken in 1909. If the Ottoman Empire planned those events, I am certain that in their congresses in 1909, those Tashnak and Hunchak committees, after their Adana congresses, they were going to fight against the Ottoman Empire, and they were clearly stating that it is time for them to separate their roads with the Ottoman Empire, but they continue working with the Progress and Union Party. And Tashnak Committee clearly stated that we will continue cooperating and collaborating with the political party of Union and Progress. This is clearly stated in their Congress's declaration. After Istanbul Congresses, by the way, there were different of opinions between the Caucasian Armenians and Tashnak and Hınçak Armenians. And when those political parties have been separated, Sabah Gülen took the lead. He was such a socialist, and he said that we should be violent against the Turks. But as the representative of the Anatolian Armenians, Boyajian actually carried out many bloodshed. After the announcement of the constitutional monarchy, he said that it is not time for bloodshed, so we should make the constitutional monarchy survive in Anatolia. That's why he said the Anatolian Armenians should take on weapons, because if he says, if he wage war right now, the whole Anatolian society will be destroyed. And Hınçak community at that Congress take the following decision. We will continue to work with the constitutional monarchy despite the Adana events, but we will increase our capabilities of self-defense, so we will take up on arms, he said. Tashnaks were thinking the same with the Hınçak committees in terms of increasing their self-defense capabilities. They were buying the weapons from Russia, and they were also buying the weapons from Egypt and brought to the country from Mersin port and being given to the Bitlis Armenians. In 1912, Social Democratic Hınçak Party and also the political party of Progress and Union openly, they actually come to consensus to work against the Progress and Union Party. In the time of Balkan Wars, on the month of August, we see that Freedom and Opposition Party was hoping to eradicate the Progress and Union Party, and the Armenians took side against the Progress and Union Party, and they openly assassinated, for example, the members of the Progress and Union Party, and that's why they cooperated with the Freedom and Opposition Party. On one side, they were the triggers of the Russians. Mateusz Sarkisyan, for example, Aramas was his code name, together with Sabah Gülen, after 1909 Congress. By the way, one of them was from Karabakh and the other one was from Nakhchivan, and they increased their efforts for organization, and we have the records of their talks, how they provoked the Armenians and how they have taken on civilian initiatives in order to provoke the Armenians against the Eastern tribes, and what kind of methodologies that they have used in order to trigger the uprisings. Of course, the Balkan Wars was another turning point. When the Ottoman Empire was involved in the Balkan Wars, there was a huge uproar in the Europe. The Russian Grand Ambassador spoke with the representatives of Tashnak and Hınçak communities, and he spoke directly with Paramas in one consulate, and stated that the Armenian political parties should unite. And Bogos Pasha was actually doing the same thing in Europe. And then National Committee was founded in Egypt, by the way. As the Balkan Wars were continuing, Tashnak and Hınçak committees united, and they actually took on the decision of waging a war against the Ottoman Empire. I mean, they have collected charities and saw that the weapons are being dispatched to the Armenians. The Bogoswar talks and its correspondences with the Tashnak and Hunchak communities are at our hands as well. The Balkan Wars ended with the loss for the Ottoman Empire. And that's why the Tashnak and Hunchak committee meetings taken place in Constanza in 1913 is really important. The seventh Social Democratic Hunchak committee meeting was really important. Paramas was in chair. Some Anatolian Armenians were not invited to the meeting, but after this meeting, Hunchak committee waged war against the Ottoman Empire, which was illegal. This was the first step going towards the 1915 relocation. And they have spoken with Mr. Sadık, and they received 40,000 francs to be received by the Party of Freedom and Opposition in order to assassinate Talat, Enver, and Cemal Pasha. So Arshavir Sahakyan, as the representative of Egypt, was in direct contact with the police forces in Istanbul, and he directly came to Istanbul representatives in order to correspond to the decision. And they stated that Paramas will come to Istanbul and they will dispatch the weapons and they will carry out an assassination on the on the leading figures of the Progress and Union Party. The Paramas was tracked down by the police forces. After that Congress, the Ottoman Empire started following closely all the offices of Tashnak and Hunchak committees because they said that they will wage war against the government, so they should be followed closely. And when the Paramas came to Istanbul, Ottoman Empire was also adopting reforms in the eastern provinces. I mean, as the Ottoman Empire was taking steps in order to solve the problem, and maybe as a result of the Russian pressure under signing the Yenikö Agreement, the Hunchak and Tashnak committees were waging war. So as a result, they were not waiting for reforms because after the constitutional monarchy was adopted, one column inside of the Tashnaks and Hunchaks were saying that the Ottoman Empire is not sincere, and they were thinking that the future of the Armenians can only be established after bloodshed and conflict. The terrorist body of Tashnak Committee, Andrei Kozanyan, didn't believe in constitutional monarchy, and he never left his weapon. And during the Balkan Wars, by the way, together with the special troops, he fought against the Ottoman Empire, and he carried out many massacres in Tekirdağ, Keşan, and Malkara. So in 1913, the reform project was dictated on the Ottoman Empire, and Talat Pasha spoke with all those Armenian leaders. Boyajian was the Istanbul representative of the Hunchak community. Vahap Papazian was a one MP, and Talat Pasha spoke with them and stated that let's resolve those reforms internally, because he cited that the Ottoman Empire had to endure many traumas, the Tripoli War, Adana events, Balkan Wars, the Albanian uprisings were going on, and there were financial problems. And he was saying that we have goodwill, we are in need of time, but after the Balkan Wars, the Armenians fought and saw the situation after the Balkan Wars as an important opportunity to establish a free Armenian state in the eastern provinces. After the Constanza meeting, In Istanbul, the third Hınçak Committee General Assembly took place, and Boyajian was the chair of the Congress. And he was rejecting the Constanza decision because during that time, Paramas was captured by the Ottoman forces. And the raids have been carried out to all Hınçak offices because all of those correspondences were followed by the Ottoman Empire. The Congress took place in 1913. But those open raids on the Hınçak committees delayed until October 1913 because the Ottoman Empire opted for a wait-and-see policy in order to find out whom is connecting with whom. Approximately 200 Hınçak committee members were captured and they were trialed in court, and these trials had been initiated during the onset of the war in 1914. 20 of them had been executed with life sentence. Sabah Gülyan and Sabat, such kind of committee members, freed away and they couldn't be executed. But all of those court decisions and verdicts are at our hands, which is published by the chief commander of the Turkish army. Those documents at our hands, we see how they are being organized. Armenians are being organized in the Anatolian provinces, how they are being investigated, and how those legal procedures are in alignment with the international law. And according to the criminal code, legal ground for their crimes were established. But certain members have been released as well since they were against the. So the Armenian side says that, these death sentences were the, first steps going towards the genocide. They try to make us forget about the Constanza meeting of the Hınçak committees. They are trying to make us believe that the Ottoman Empire collected 200 civilians and executed them. But those executions were about 1 year long legal proceedings. And Paramas, for example, had the chance to assassinate Talat Pasha or Enver Pasha. This is what comes to light after his investigation. But unfortunately, it is quite upsetting that one of the MPs in our parliament, by taking the courage from the Biden's speeches, he stated that we have done, so many for the sake of this country, as the Paramas said. Maybe the historical realities are being forgotten, but the ones who try to establish their own socialist history or Armenian nationalism, unfortunately, socialists are embracing those, groundless realities, and they are trying to create, fake heroes. But the legal documents and the historical documents are showing us that they were collecting money, under the disguise of charity in order to be dispatched to the Armenian gangs and terrorists. This Paramas person wandered all around the world, and when he is being asked why you didn't kill Enver Pasha in Taksim Square, he stated that, they didn't give me 20,000 francs, that's why I didn't murder him, he says. Of course, there are different congresses that we can mention. Kemal Çelik pinpointed one congress in 1914 on August when the war broke out. The 8th Congress was held in Erzurum. 7th Congress was really important. According to certain historical documents, it took place in Erzurum. According to certain historical documents, the 7th Taşnak Congress took place in Varna. So Taşnaks also held a congress. What about Taşnak congresses? They took the decision to separate their roads with the Progress and Union Party, and they took the decision to work together with the Hunchak committees. They will combine their forces because this is what the Russian wanted. And they will focus on their self-defense and they will protect their rights. That was the decision. But they stated that we are not against the government. I mean, we will be abiding by the constitutional monarchy. But how this can be possible? So 5 minutes, 5 minutes. You have 5 more minutes. Okay, Professor, I will wrap it up. On one side, in the Grand National Assembly, Hunchak and Tashnak MPs would like to collect the weapons of the Armenians in the eastern provinces, and they wanted the solution of the Hamidiye troops. But I believe these are in controversy with each other. On the other side, we have spoken about the Erzurum Congress. This is one of the controversial congresses, but Mr. Kemal spoke about it. In the Erzurum Congress, the Tashnaks gathered together, but in Tbilisi, the Russian Tashnaks came together as well. But on 19 or 14 August, Vaham Papazian wrote many things in his memoirs, and let's take a look what he said. The decisions of the Erzurum Congress are not implemented, and we have cooperated with the Caucasia after abiding by the mobilization decision. And this person was organizing cooperation between the Armenians, and they were collecting the Armenians under the same roof so that they can act against the Ottoman Empire. And by the way, they wanted from the Tashnaks to fight against the Russians, and they wanted the Armenians to actually use their influences in order to make Armenians fight together with the Ottoman Empire against the Russians, but it was not possible because they have already decided to fight against the Ottoman army together with the Russians. And we shouldn't forget about the fact that the Izmir Armenians had already decided to fight against the Ottoman army. And one of the Armenian authors stated that this voluntary mobilization of the Armenians together with the Russians were leading them to their disaster. They thought that it was in an organized fashion. The Armenians have taken up on arms, and the Armenian historians and the Armenian ones who support the accusations of genocide says that they were actually behind their self-defense. They are trying to show us that they couldn't take up on arms for self-defense, they say, because they stated that the Progress and Union Party have already decided to commit genocide according to them. Well, if we and Kevorkian, what Kevorkian wrote is quite awkward. When he is using Gülian ideas, if we take a look at how the events turn out, we should accept that the Gülian's opinion are right. Unfortunately, those books are being published by the leading publishing houses in Turkey, so we should study those. We are in need of more detailed studies. By saying that, I would like to end my speech. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this nice presentation. It was a wonderful presentation, and it was really important. I do believe Michael Günther is with us. I can see his name. I would like to yield the floor to him. Michael, could you please unmute your...
Can you hear me? Do you hear me? It was not working. And of course, nobody is here to help. And then after about half an hour, the computer did turn on, and here I am. So my apologies. Better late than never. I want to thank everybody who is involved with the conference for inviting me, and I wish you all very well. And here I go. In their 656-page tome, The 30-Year Genocide, Turkey's Destruction of its Christians. The purpose of this 30-year-long genocide supposedly was to reduce Turkey's large Christian minority of some 20% of its population to less than 2% by 1924, and of course much less today. And the purpose of reducing this minority population was to create a homogeneous Muslim Turkish nation out of the ruins of the multinational Ottoman Empire. Furthermore, today, some Armenians and their devotees even claim that Turkey support for Azerbaijan's recent successful war to regain some 16% of its territory occupied by Armenia because of the war over Nagorno-Karabakh early in the 1990s, that what Azerbaijan in support of Turkey in the fall of 2020 was also a continuation of the genocide. Then these two Israeli scholars, Morris and Zeevi, argue that, well, Western and Armenian documents on these events are accurate, Ottoman documents are not accurate and should be ignored. Well, what can I say? First of all, there can be no doubt that Muslims did commit unspeakable outrages against their Christian minorities. The two Israeli authors excruciatingly recite numerous reputed details regarding decapitations, disembowelments, crucified priests, severed fingers and ears, mass raping of women and girls, and so forth. However, despite their frequent assertions and implications, the authors failed to prove that the Ottoman authorities ordered these horrific deeds, rather than they were the result of the primitive state of Ottoman resources that led to what might be termed criminal deaths from local vendettas, robberies, neglect, starvation, and so forth. The authors also largely gloss over too blithely or simply ignore much solid counter-arguments and evidence that the Christians often gave as much as they received. Fortunately, if we are going to speak about a continuing genocide whose roots date back well before World War I, it is only fair to start with the deportations and mass killings of Muslims from the Balkans by the newly created Christian states, beginning with the Greek rebellion in 1821, ethnic cleansing in the Caucasus in the 1860s, Bulgaria 1877, and northern Greece and Macedonia in 1912-13. In this period, several million Ottoman Muslim refugees were deported to Anatolia or murdered in situ, a dynamic that helped lead to fear and hatred of the Christian minorities in Anatolia. In addition, the Serbian genocidal attacks against Bosnian Muslims in the 1990s might also be viewed as a modern-day continuation of these earlier acts. Nor do the two Israeli authors give fair bent to the long-running Armenian terrorist provocations against Muslims during the 1890s, documented well by the famous American historian William Langer and the even more famous British scholar Arnold J. Toynbee, among others, as well as such Armenian scholars themselves as Louise Nalbandian. The two Israeli authors also neglect even to mention the testimony of Hovhannes Kaczynski, the first prime minister of Armenia after World War I, and thus an Armenian authority well judged to talk about the origins of what he termed, quote, this unspeakable crime, the deportations and mass exiles and massacres of Armenians, which took place during the summer and autumn of 1915. Yet Kaczynski concluded, the proof is, however, and this is essential, that the struggle began decades ago against the Turkish government and brought about the deportation or extermination of the Armenian people in Turkey. Despite these grievous losses, the Armenians still managed to fight a war against Ataturk's emerging Turkish Republic following World War I for mastery in Eastern Anatolia. After they lost, many Armenians in time came to claim, as do these two Israeli authors, that what had occurred was simply renewed genocide. The Turks, on the other hand, saw it as part of their war of independence and understandably hesitate to admit sole guilt for all these horrible events. The two Israeli authors' position is all the more problematic given how they fail even to mention that Shimon Peres, the late dovish Israeli foreign minister, prime minister, and president, declared in 2001, we reject attempts to create a similarity between the Holocaust and the Armenian allegations. Nothing similar to the Holocaust occurred. It is a tragedy what the Armenians went through, but not a genocide. Excuse me. Similarly, the current Israeli president, Reuven Rivlin, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu do not use the term genocide. Of course, it is true that the Turks for too long have refused to come to grips with the enormity of the great Armenian catastrophe, Metz Yeghern in Armenian, and the terrible Turkish Muslim role in it. Nevertheless, in April 2014, the much maligned in the West then Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan President Erdogan did declare in 2014, we wish that the Armenians who lost their lives in the context of the early 20th century rest in peace, and we convey our condolences to their grandchildren. I think this was a positive step towards reconciliation, which, however, the two Israeli authors' one-sided version of these events is not. Moreover, to term genocide Ataturk's desperate and heroic existential struggle against the ethnic cleansing perpetrated by the invading Greeks that began in 1919 with British support and that drove to within 50 miles of Ankara in central Anatolia before finally being halted and pushed back to the sea, is a revealing example of the author's biases. Further ignored is Ataturk's magnanimous refusal to trample upon an enormous Greek flag his troops threw before him after he retook Smyrna, Izmir, from the invading Greeks. Instead, the founder of modern Turkey used his victory to commence a reconciliation with Greece and its prime minister, Eleftherios Venizelos. Excuse me, frog in mouth. Okay, back. Further missing from this one-sided version of events called the continuing genocide that I'm talking about is the fact that much confusion exists about what is meant by the term genocide. What do we mean by genocide? The word has come to have at least two different meanings. One, a precise international legal one, and two, a non-legal popular definition. The two different meanings have been conflated by some either by mistake or on purpose to confuse the world and accuse Turkey of being guilty of genocide for the Armenian massacres that occurred more than a century ago. Given this confusing situation, a brief analysis of these two different meanings of the term genocide is in order. Legally, genocide is defined by the Genocide Convention that was signed in 1948 and then ratified in 1951 when it then went into effect. The Genocide Treaty, as you know, in part legally defines genocide as, quote, acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Therefore, for genocide to have legally occurred, there must have been intent, premeditation on the part of the perpetrators to wipe out an entire ethnic group. And this act must have been committed since 1951, after the Genocide Treaty went into effect. Neither requirement has occurred in regards to the Armenians. Despite what many Armenians and their supporters claim, there is no authentic document that proves that the Ottoman authorities intended to wipe out the Armenians. Indeed, many Armenians living in Western Anatolia who were deemed no threat to Ottoman supply lines and security were not relocated in 1915. Is it possible to imagine Hitler sparing any Jews from his genocidal rampage because they were not threatening his supply lines or security? Therefore, without proven intent, legally there can be no genocide. In addition, of course, even if intent could be demonstrated, which it has not, genocide legally could not have occurred before the Genocide Treaty was ratified and went into effect in 1951, because that would constitute an ex post facto law expressly prohibited by Article 11 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 15 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and even Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution of my own country, the United States, which all prohibit ex post facto laws. And of course, an ex post facto law makes some action a crime, which, when it was originally committed, was not a crime. Furthermore, for the U.S. Congress or any other legislative body to pass any resolution declaring that the Armenian tragedy was a genocide would be analogous to a bill of attainder, which is a legislative act which punishes somebody without a fair judicial trial. A bill of attainder which is also specifically prohibited by Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution. Therefore, applying the Genocide Treaty to the Armenian tragedy by using an ex post facto law or bill of attainder would be a clear violation of due process of law, which is specifically prohibited by the 5th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, as well as by implication by Article 7 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Articles 14 and 26 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Excuse me. The Armenians and their supporters are trying to get around these major international, legal, and U.S. constitutional safeguards by confusingly conflating the legal definition of genocide with the more general popular one that equates genocide loosely with any large-scale killings that have ever occurred, either before 1951 or after that date, when the Genocide Treaty went into effect. By this second non-legal definition of genocide, of course, the Armenians suffered from large-scale killings or genocide. Yes. And so did the Turks and other Muslims who were killed by ethnic violence during World War I and earlier in the Balkans. By this non-legal definition of genocide, both Muslims and Armenians committed genocide against each other. To accuse only one side of this situation ignores what happened to the other and is patently unfair. So, in conclusion, the many Armenians and their supporters who accused Turkey of genocide, either through simple lack of the complete facts or on purpose to malign Turkey for their own reasons, these people continue to try to piggyback these two different definitions of genocide. It is time for governments, scholars, and the intelligent lay public to stop confusing these two different definitions of genocide and get their facts straight, so we will not continue to dishonor the memory of those who so tragically died on both sides during the World War I. Thank you. I'm finished.
Thank you very much, Professor Günter.
Thank you.
Now our last speaker will be coming, Süleyman Beyoğlu. The floor is yours, Süleyman Bey.
I stopped talking too early. I think I've said enough. Maybe questions.
I'm here, Professor. All right. Suleiman, the floor is yours. You have 30 minutes. First of all, allow me to present my deepest respect, love, and affection to the Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University and dear participants. So my speech will be about the conversion and the converted Armenians. This is a, detailed topic during the relocation. Well, the Armenians who are Muslim are deemed as if they didn't existed. There are many Armenians, who were Muslims. So although it will be a small contribution, this will be, I will try to do. Ihtida, as you know, is an Arabic word which means converting to Islam, accepting the reality, or finding the orthodox path. And the ones who are converting to Islam in Arabic is called as muhtedi, the converted. First of all, let me say a couple of reasons why people are converting to a different religion. There might be economic, psychological reasons, religious reasons, political reasons, cultural or social reasons. Of course, we will focus on the economic and political factors of conversion or changing religion, in another saying. One of the most important problems that the Ottoman Empire had to deal with during the First World War was the issue of implementing the law on relocation and resettlement. The Ottoman Empire was fighting on 4 different fronts. And at the same time, it had to deal with the Armenian problem. And that's why the Ottoman Empire had to enact a new law. And the reason behind that law was the fact that the Armenians were cooperating with the enemy. Cooperating with the enemy, espionage, giving logistical support to the enemy, and uprisings were among the reasons why the Ottoman state enacted this law on relocation and resettlement. And the Ottoman state relocated and sent the Armenians, forcibly evicted them to the northern part of Iraq and Syria. And this decision was adopted on 27th of May, 1915. And it is known that the relocation and resettlement wasn't applied to all the Armenians. For example, the Catholic and Protestant Armenians were tried to be out of this implementation. But of course, the ones who had been found out to be inflicting damage on the state, but of course, were subject to the relocation. According to a document dated 15th of August 1915, Armenian MPs in the Ottoman parliament, Armenian public officers, military officers, and also the logistic troops are exempt from the relocation. And the Armenians who worked for the military factories, doctors, healthcare professionals, and healthcare officers, the disabled Armenians, and the blind ones, and also the Ottoman bank officers were exempt from the relocation. Of course, there are certain provinces which are subject to exception, by the way. Istanbul Armenians, for example, were exempt from the relocation if they are not involved in any treacherous act. In the provinces like Aydın, Kütahya, and Antalya, the Armenians were exempt from the relocation if they are not involved in any sort of conspiracy. Another, of course, exception to be exempt from the relocation and resettlement was converting their religion. And that is one of the ways that the Armenians opted for. So they converted their religion to Islam. In a document on 22nd of June 1915, it is stated that Van, Trabzon, Erzurum, Bitlis, Mameretul Aziz, Diyarbakır, and Sivas provinces and Janik provinces are the places where the Armenians are exempt from the relocation and resettlement. But this was a secret order, and it is warned that the Armenians shouldn't be living in the same neighborhood in a crowded fashion. The İskani Aşair and Muhacirin directorates stated that if the fathers of the families are being relocated, the Armenians who converted to Islam will be staying in their provinces. They will be exempt from the relocation, and they will be helped with allowances. If there is an abuse, like seizing the goods of those Armenians, though they will be returning back to them. The converted Armenians are being given a new identity, and in order to enable them to, travel freely, on the backside of their identities, only their neighborhoods are being written and stamped on, so that those Armenians are not understood that they are the converted ones. So I do believe this is an important precautions. As you know, during the mobilization, there was travel restrictions for all the Ottoman citizens, not the Armenians, and the converted Armenians are also among those who are subject to the travel restrictions. As the application for converting to Islam increased among Armenians in order to, take back their goods, the Ottoman Empire decided not to accept insincere application for conversion. According to the 1st of July 1915, to this telegraph, it was stated that the Armenians are converting to Islam as groups, as masses, and that's why the political party in power pinpoints that the Armenians are converting to Islam in an insincere manner. So they are making use of conversion as a tool in order to protect their own interest. Maybe there was something that I had to say at the beginning. I have taken a look to the statistics. From 1924 to 1999, 20,000 people have converted to Islam in Turkey. 16,000 of them are in Turkey, and the rest of them are outside of Turkey. Of course, this is the number that I could, find. Most probably this figure increased as well. At the beginning, even if the Armenians converted to Islam, the political party in power thought that they will not give up from their heinous acts. If they are not going to the places that they are relocated, even if they converted to Islam, then they are still forced to evict their places. On 13th of July 1915, the governorate of the Kayseri stated that the Armenians are converting to Islam for the sake of protecting their interests, and that's why once again the state tried to prevent those insincere conversions. So those converted people, especially women and children, are left in their places, and they stated that those conversions are insincere, so it should be taken precautiously. The Armenian children who are without mothers and fathers should go to the dorms, to the dormitories, the orphanages, so that their allowances can be provided to them, or those Armenian children can be given to the Muslim families according to those decisions. Let me say a couple of things more. Again, in 1915, in an order sent to the Erzurum, Trabzon, and Sivas provinces, it was stated that their Muslim neighbors can hide Armenians, and Armenians are hidden in those Muslim houses so that they can actually get away with the relocation. According to the Ottoman laws, in order for a person to be converted to Islam, there was an age limitation, which was 15. As the application for conversion increased back then, this 16th article of the identity law had been enacted, and it stated that anyone below the age of 20 will not be accepted as they applied for conversion. So according to a telegraph wrote for the Bolu Directorate, the Armenians who would like to choose Islam is allowed to do so, but on 4th of November 1915, a letter has been sent to the directorates, and they have been warned they shouldn't be relocated. If they converted to Islam, they can stay, wherever they live. And this order has been sent as a special order. The ones who converted, is stated that their conversion will be accepted. This is an important decision, which was sent to all the governorates and provinces as of 4th of November 1915. The conversion of the Armenian women are not accepted if their men are fighting in the war. It is understood from this decision and order sent by Karahisar province. And I would like to touch upon a couple of more issues. The converted ones who will be subject to relocation are generally comprised of women and children. There are men, of course, but more than 50% of them are comprised of women and children. When we come to 1916, 30th of April 1916, the relocation ended already, as you know. Especially the women and children during the relocation and resettlement are to be protected, and their allowances to be provided to them. And the ones who don't have any relatives should be referred to the places where their protection will be warranted. On 2nd of June 1916, an order has been sent to Mardin Governorate. If the capacity of the orphanages are not enough, then the extension buildings will be added to those orphanages. Not only the Armenian children will be accepted to the orphanages, and the Muslim children will be accepted to the orphanages according to this decision. In a correspondence sent to Sivas Governorate, the Armenian converted people can marry each other, and Sivas province is warned that the converted ones can actually marry with the Muslims. There is no problem. In order to speed up, Armenian women, in order to actually escape the relocation, also married to Ottoman military officers, because the wives of the Armenian wives of the Ottoman military officers were easily traveling to anywhere other than Istanbul. On 23rd of March 1918, the 3rd Army Chief Commander Vehip Pasha wrote a telegraph to the General Command, stated that the converted Armenians murdered their Muslim neighbors and they have oppressed them, and the precautions should be taken against them, according to this correspondence of the 3rd Army commander. So the converted Armenians are observed to attack on Muslims, and they give examples. In Ilıca, Tütüncü Efendi, for example, had hidden Armenians in his house, and he was murdered by the Armenians that he had hidden. And Sabit Bey also was murdered by the Armenians and his partners. And Osman Bey and his son Reza Bey was also murdered by the Armenians who were his friends. And in Ashkale, again, Mr. Mahmud was also murdered by the Armenians whom he had hidden in his house. And let me give a couple of examples how the conversion is being carried out. This is the Svajian family. They published in 1977 this book, How the Conversion is Carried Out. I will not go into details, but I will touch upon a couple of important points. When an Armenian would like to convert to Islam, first, they are applying for the local courts and to the local directorate of the religious affairs. They can go to this religious officer who is called Mufti as a family or individually. The Mufti, this religious officer, is asking this question: did you accept the right religion? And he says, yes, I accepted. And he is asking whether you gave up on the cause of Trinity. And if he says yes, then he is asking from the Armenian to profess and deliver the Islamic confession of faith. After he or she delivers the Islamic confession of faith, then he converts to Islam. And then they have been given burqa, and Mufti, the religious officer, congratulates them. This is the process. There are examples from Kütahya and Kayseri as well, but I will not touch upon to those examples in order not to time additional time. In his memoirs, Svajian says that in Kayseri province, there were 16,000 Armenians, and 4,000 of them didn't go to relocation and exile, and they converted to Islam. Certain other documents claim that there were 46,000 Armenians. Some of them were Catholic, some of them were Protestants in the Kayseri. So in a total, there were 50,000 Kayseri Armenians in the region. Approximately 5,000 of them was sent to Aleppo. 500 of them escaped during the relocation, and 5% of them were Catholic and Protestant Armenians, and they stayed in Kayseri, for example. So in order to speed up and not to take your time any further, let me say Kayseri was an example that I have chosen. There were approximately 2,000 Armenians against 196,000 Turks after Lausanne Treaty. Thousands of Armenians, by the way, emigrated to many Western countries, including but not limited to USA. So during the relocation and resettlement, there were certain applications from the Kütahya province Armenians for conversion. There is Stepanyan family, for example, from Kütahya province. They are, by the way, poets. And Kütahya was among the provinces which was exempt from the relocation and resettlement, by the way. And this family actually explains how they converted to Islam, by the way. After the peace agreement, Stepanyan says that the certain Armenians was criticizing the converted ones. One Armenian out of those 12, if he or she converts to Islam, the mayor was asking the converted whether he was sincere in the conversion, and then 11 of them gave up and they embraced their religion, but one of them insisted on the conversion. And Faik Bey, the governor of the region, stated that he was sincere, so he actually converted to Islam on sincere basis. So that's why this family says, this Armenian family says that no Armenian family was harmed during the relocation and resettlement. But what happened to the Muslim Armenians? One of the first job of Mr. Ahmed after the ceasefire agreement, the converted ones are facilitated if they would like to embrace their original religion back. And the following governments have raised this issue, articulated this issue, and of course, there are the converted, converteds which who actually married to Muslims as well. So they should be, assessed in a different category. But this issue is abused so much, I have to say. I mean, the issue regarding to children is abused a lot. I will give a couple of statistics about it. There are the Armenian women who were married to, for example, Muslim officers and converted to Islam, by the way, and there was a huge pressure coming from the Armenian Patriarch on the Ottoman state after the ceasefire agreement. And the Armenian Patriarch always stated that that amount of women was married to public officers, and that's why they have chosen the Islam. Of course, I will not go into the details of those events, but let me say this. The majority of the, there is, for example, Nivart Hanım, one Armenian lady who converted to Islam, and she stated that, I like my husband and I chose Islam on my free will. That's why I'm not changing my religion, she says. The consulates and also the grand embassies put a lot of pressure on the Ottoman Empire, and all, of course, those pressures have been assessed and the responses were given back to those consulates. In 28th of November 1918, the correspondences have been given to the different provinces. The converted, women, who have chosen Islam, had the chance to, speak with their families when they are returning back from the relocation. And if they want, they can go back to their original religion. In the decree regarding to the return of the Armenian back to their homelands, there was an article number 8, regarding to the conversion. the converted ones have the right, reserve the right to make use of the freedom of religion and worship. The converted ones have the right to return back to their original religion if they want to. So the Marriage Act will be terminated automatically if they choose so. So it is, clear, and it is being corresponded to the Ministry of Interior of Affairs, and together with the list prepared by the police forces, those lists are being corresponded to the Patriarch and also the representatives of the allied powers. There are certain news on the newspapers, but I will skip them. There are certain claims and allegations that the children who stayed in the orphanages lived under harsh conditions and they were kept there forcibly. But those accusations and allegations have been assessed by the Ottoman state representatives, and they spoke with them, and if they want, they can go back to their original religion. So let me summarize my conclusion in order not to take your further time. Toprak Manyan, the daughter of Agop, was found out to be living in Kastamonu, and her conversion was not going to be accepted if she is less than 20 years old. I mean, if she was less than 20 years old when she converted to Islam, then this conversion was not to be accepted. But if she is married, then she will be asked whether she is sincere with her conversion or not. So any Armenians, either man or woman, if they converted to Islam before the age of 20, then their conversions will be deemed null and void. And the ones who would like to go back to their original religion, the legal pathway for that was open. So let me say this one, on 26th of March 1919, in a telegraph sent to one of our provinces, the district mayor was, according to the accusation, was said to be putting pressure on the Armenians not to change their religion, and this issue has been investigated, and it was turned out to be a false allegation. Mr. Kemal wrote a comment on the chat box. I couldn't see her name, and I will answer to what is being written on the chat as well. So in a nutshell, I can say that if the Armenian women are married and if they would like to, divorce their husband, they can get divorced. Navartanum, for example, she spoke with her family and she stated that she is okay with her husband, and she said that I am not converted to Islam forcibly. So this is one of the examples. Let's come to the time of Sèvres Treaty, 1920. Then I will wrap up my speech. On 16th of August, 1920, 142nd article of the Sèvres Treaty is about the conversion. According to this article, it is stated that there was a regime of terror in Turkey. None of the conversion took place under normal conditions. As a result, the conversions took place after 1st of November 1914 will be deemed null and void according to Sèvres Treaty. So, as long as the ones who are insisting on staying as Muslim, the conversions after 1st of November 1914 will be deemed null and void. So, as a conclusion, thousands of Armenians have converted to Islam in order to escape the relocation and resettlement, and the majority of those conversions were not sincere, of course. I mean, since the applications for conversion increased, it was understood that people, I mean, the applicant, and didn't take those conversions into consideration. More importantly, I have to say that during the relocation and resettlement, the conversion applications from time to time were limited. Sometimes it was kept much more looser, but we have to say that the Ottoman state acted in line with the domestic law. And Mr. Kemal reminded me, and let me give you a couple of statistics regarding to the conversions. We don't have exact figures and statistics. For example, we don't know how many Muslim, for example, children have turned into Christianity or given to Armenians. According to the documents of the League of Nations, it was stated that approximately 79,000 women and children converted to Islam. And according to the global statistics, 817,873 Armenians have been relocated and resettled from Turkey. And out of this 817,000 Armenians, 95,000 of them were said to be Muslim. So according to those figures, if you do the math, there is approximately 1,120,000 Armenians. Pabuchian, who is an Armenian himself, stated that approximately the converted Armenians are almost equal to 100,000. And this figure is in line with the documents of the League of Nations. The Armenians who were not relocated or resettled, 200,000 of them are Catholic or Protestants. Aramian, although didn't give a specific figure, states that between 5 or 10% of the Armenians were expected to be converted to Islam. And he states that we lack to, clear figures about the relocated and resettled Armenians, numbers of them. And Mr. Kemal gives additional information to us. Although they are 50,000, 70,000, or 100,000, these Armenians are shown as if they are dead. And I also have to clearly state that certain researchers and historians also claim that the Armenians are actually ignored. I mean, their existence is ignored and denied, and that's why they are subject to assimilation. This is a totally wrong approach. I mean, the state, it doesn't matter whether they converted to Islam or whether they gave up on Islam, still are accepted after the ceasefire agreement as they are returning back to their homeland. In the recent years, many researches and studies have been carried out about this issue. So with this sentence, I will end my speech. Claiming that the Ottoman Empire has this denial policy is groundless, because I have written an article about the Sivas province. There were clear numbers about what was the exact numbers of Muslim Armenians in the Sivas province. I'll not go into details because it will take too much time. I mean, I have presented this in one of the symposiums, and the participants claim that this is a huge number. And the governor said that I visited two Armenian tradesmen last week, and he stated that they turned back to their own religion, and this took place 20 years ago. So this is the end of my speech, but apologies, one or two sentences more. According to Talat Pasha memoirs, the Armenian children who have been sent to the Muslim families is 6,758. And the Armenian children who have been sent to the orphanages is 3,501. In 69 orphanages, there were approximately 20 children comprised of Armenians and Turks. And almost 50,000 of the orphans, I mean, the majority of them were said to be the Muslims, but some of them are unfortunately the Armenian children. So he says that those Armenian children were returned back to the Armenian patriarch. That was the last speech. It is not easy to tolerate the last speech, but thank you so much for your patience.
Actually, I have prepared some certain questions. Yes. Actually, I was disconnected. I have reconnected with my mobile phone. I will continue from here. I didn't have any other chance. Okay. I would like to take Süleyman Bey Lad. Actually, when we speak about the issue of actually governing issue and power, Diyarbakir massacre has been written by Thomas Miller Chan. In 19 years, he has been the vice ambassador in the report. He's speaking about the Armenians. He has got an appendix part in his book. And later on, it was published as a book. Again, which Armenian sect was being assigned under which Kurdish sect and where did they live have been presented in this book. So they are more in number than it was assumed to be. And the vice patriarch, a short period ago, because of taking the responsibility of intention in from his own neighbors, 1,000 people have been baptized, he said. He declared this fact. So there is such kind of a situation. And this part has always been ignored as neglected. And about this topic, actually, they have got an explanation. In Anatolia, the people who were thought to be killed, 1 million Armenian people are still living in Anatolia, where we are going to place them. And also Armenian people have accused Hrant Dink for actually violating their attempts to about Holocaust issue and this genocide issue. And so we need to reconsider the topic, actually. We don't aim to name people, label people as Armenian people, Turkish people. I mean, some Armenians who were assumed that, who were thought that were killed are maybe were alive. 500,000 Armenian people are still living under the label of a Muslim. So they are living as Muslims and they are still surviving as a generation as Muslims. And I had a call from TV. If you are not exactly and really accepting Muslim belief due to some political conflicts in the past, if you are presenting yourself as Muslim people, as Muslim citizens, it is better to return back to your own religion. I have said, because it's a torture somehow. I wanted to terminate this problem. I want to end this problem. Süleyman Bey mentioned it briefly. In the post-war Iran, about the people who have survived and who have just been transformed and or have not sincerely actually transformed their religion, and they have taken a decision to turn back their religion if they like. After the war, they have taken this decision, and for a short period of time, some people have returned back to their own religion. And also the children, the orphan children who were under the protection of Red Cross, actually have been brought back to their families if they have had remaining family members, and the ones who do not have any family members have been left under the control of patriarchs. And some of them have considered to be Christians, but they have been registered as Muslims. And some of them, of course, being re-registered according to their own beliefs. So we do have such kind of situation. Unfortunately, I could not mention it on TV a lot. I would like to say one thing. All my colleagues have presented very important information starting from yesterday. Turkey needs to do something about Armenian, so-called Armenian genocide. There's a huge potential to go in depth, to go further, and many fields have been already researched in the past. There were some claims that we don't have enough research as just like the Armenian side, but this is on the contrary when you look at the present reality. I mean, we are speaking about academical research, scientific research, and scientific approaches. I'm not speaking about propaganda materials. And many science persons in Turkey and also the country opinion owners, Armenian supporters as science people, do not have a high probability of falling into the trap of conflict because they don't have a huge amount of potential on the Armenian side, scientific Armenian side. Tashan Sütyan's program, when you look at his program, when you look at TKK's program, in their programs, they were so much compiling with each other. They were so much in harmony with each other. And also, PYD's in Azerbaijan region during the 44 days of war have sent a certain amount of militants, guerrillas in Syria, some part of Turkey. Actually, the Armenians who are involved in PKK groups, guerrilla groups, it can be seen as a continuum of Pashnak groups. If you have further questions, we will lead them towards our professors. And Tarık Bey, I have a low battery. If it is not sufficient, please, you continue to moderate the session. Yes. Let me have the questions and comments from our professors. Do you have any contributions, Birol Bey or anyone else would like to comment further? Birol Bey, would you please turn on your sound? It was very beneficial and very fruitful. Hope that it will be possible to publish all of these presentations. If there is any demand for our contribution as an institution, I'm ready to serve, to respond, any type of demand. Your contributions and your proposals are very valuable for us. And many of the speakers have been communicating via your reference, Yusuf Bey, and other professors, and Kemal Bey. Really, we are all making use of your knowledge and expertise in this field. I would like to address a question to each of the speakers. Haluk Bey, I would like to ask you first of all. Haluk Bey, can you hear me? Would you please turn on your sound? Haluk Bey, I would like to ask you. All of these paramilitant type of Armenian, Tashnakian, and Hinchakian groups. When we consider those groups in the beginning of 20th century and starting earlier than the beginning of the 20th century, if there are some certain conditions which makes the actually deportation fair, can we consider those distributed Armenian groups, Armenian young, to create such kind of paramilitant groups? Can be considered as a risk for those times when we consider PKK, for example, demands of our present time. Actually, normal Kurdish citizens are not asking what PKK is asking for, and the government is aware of this fact. And so when we consider those times, and when we consider the relationship between the militant groups and also the young generation, did they have a high level of hesitation and concern so that they have taken the deportation decision? Can we say it? Can we claim it? We are speaking about the Eastern Anatolian region. In 1915, when we from Izmit, we are starting to see a Bolu, Yozgat, and Kayseri region. We have got such kind of a structure, huge distributed geography. In our red book and in our white book, all of these committees and all of their organizations, region by region, city by city, have information in detail about these committees. In 1870s, the security problem in the Eastern Anatolian region, Armenian issues, and also the establishment of the committees. And also when we look at 1878 and Berlin, all of the returning actually groups from Berlin and all of the published Armenian newspapers, and also the declarations, Patrick Grimian's, for example, declarations and statements. If you stay like a ship, many people will slaughter you. You are going to be slaughtered inescapably, is his statement. So the first organizations in Van, in Erzurum, they are establishing the actually first groups of rising groups, revolting groups of so before Hamidiye troops, they have established this in 1892 and 95. They are creating a structure there in 1885 in Erzurum. The first armed troops, actually guerrilla troops, have been established in from Russia. The guns are being brought and distributed to these groups. When we look at Paramazliv, Sabah Gülen as a model, all of these committee members actually were illegal people, and then somehow due to some actually criminal reasons, they were living on the mountains, so they were the outlaws. And Adrenin's words, actually, Adrenin states that nothing in life have empowered and also made me excited as well as the gun which I have had in my arms for the very first time when I was acting against the Turkish troops. So it is not a defending actually of a state which actually rights have been violated. You're attacking the Ottoman Empire troops, and you claim that all of the actually their tendency is so similar to PKK, our present times PKK. They were kidnapping the rich Armenian children to mountain and bringing them to mountain, and they were asking for money. And actually, Saraf Abu, for example, in quotation, for example, is having their suppression. They have insisted to give him themselves money, and there is an attack against the patriarch, and they have pushed him to sign up from his responsibility, and they have killed the patriarch in Istanbul. And let's go further. Ottoman civilian administrators and also governmental structures have also have the suppression and impact of those groups. Going up to the mountain, moving up to the mountain, was it something risky for the Armenian civilians at those times? Hamparshun Boyajian, 1893, is moving to Yozgat and Yozgat village with his brother Jiray in Yozgat, Merzifon, Kayseri, and Ankara. All of these regions have had a lot of rebellious actions, and many people have lost their life. Let me give an example. 3 people are coming with their guns at Ideli village. All the speeches are under record. Russia and UK is supporting us, so a very important person will be sent to you by the Russian Tsar. You are going to have weapons and guns, and when that day comes, you are going to act together with us. If you do not support us, you will be sorry for yourself, for your destiny. And they are going to the Muslim neighborhoods, and they're writing many things on the walls of the mosques. And on those writings, the Armenian lights will be on and Muslim lights will be off. And they are distributing bulletins, and it was studied as a PhD dissertation. 1893 Ankara court records. France and UK and many other European countries are following these trials. Merzifon American College is publishing, is printing these bulletins in their own library. And it is not a matter of actually a local community and local militant activity. There is an international force support behind. For example, American citizens, American Armenians have not been actually arrested in prison. George Lott, an American missionary, have spent his 50 years in Bitlis in 1895. They received a letter of him, and he was writing a letter to Erzurum, and actually it's time to move. And the governor says that you need to move him away, deport him away, because he's creating a misunderstanding in the eye of the Armenian people, Armenian population, and revolting acting them and making them to act with a rebellion. And actually, we are speaking about a returning back mindset from Western countries, and the reform period really encouraged them a lot. And also the constitutional law changes have really encouraged them, and they have believed that they would be established an independent Armenian republic. Farkbey asked for some certain figures. How many people were present as the militants? You are speaking about the Armenian communities, but the rebellious side was only 3%. Some people claim something like that. Exactly, Kemal Bey. That's also important. Yusuf Bey also mentioned that in his speech. The main reason of deportation is bringing away those committee members and replacing them. And on the other side, there were Armenian villagers who were hiding them, and there were some supporters also. So the actually secret societies, when we speak about secret societies, they were also secretly being supported by the local people. In 1953 in Adapazarı, there is a 25% of an Armenian population. And when we look at, of course, during the 17th year of the celebration Armenian nation, we see a killed military soldier, for example. A lot of gendarmes, a lot of soldiers were being killed by the hand of Armenians. And Armash monastery, for example, is a very religious, important religious center. This important religious center's storage has got, for example, materials to make gun, to make bomb, and they have shoot the photograph of these places, and it was recorded during the second Reformation period. Because of the election process, 60% of them have been politicized. Those Armenians have been politicized. So there's a mis self-confidence, and they were looking at the Muslim society as a secondary citizen, and all of the commercial activities were also being entrapped in a sense. Kevorkian is writing like that for Smyrna Armenians or Adapazarı Armenians. All of the commercial relationships were in the hand of Armenians. So we were having such kind of facts. And what was keeping the Ottoman Empire actually still are the Armenians, of course, but when we come to the secret society activities, we cannot ignore and we cannot actually deny the fact that it was essential to deport them because they were controlling and manipulating the society. I mean, they were owning the whole power and they were politically empowered, and but they are not victim, actually. They are not actually safe and secure. There are some certain reasons and facts as an infrastructure, and mentioning those figures is not very easy. And when we look at the number of the, for example, voters for Progress and Union Party and Tashnak Party or Sugurian Party, it is not possible to state it. And not all of the Armenians have voted for Tashnakin Party, and there are some of the ones who are voting for Progress and Union Party and for Ahvakasian Party, but it is very hard to determine them. Actually, deportation is not related with a partial group of people. Catholics should not be actually deported. Protestants should not be deported. Was not the approach. It would create some certain problems if they have done it like that. Kastamonu was excluded from these destinations, and 13 actually 1,000 Armenians were living there, and no one has been deported from Kastamonu. From Smyrna, 254, 250 from Istanbul and Edirne have been deported, but they were the members of the illegal organizations, secret societies, Adapazarı, İzmit, Bursa. I mean, they have been caught with their weapons, with their guns. And how can I say? When we speak about illegal groups, guerrilla groups, they were generally, like the Bitlis guerrilla group was coming to Zeytun. So they were mobile, they were continuously moving from one place to another, from Ulukuşla. They were going to Kafkasia on foot, and they were going with their guns, and on the way they had sabotage actions, and Armenian actually sabotage have taken place. And also the logistic support was coming from the inhabitants, Armenian inhabitants of those regions. Okay, the civilian people were not willingly helping them maybe, but they have been enforced to support the actually Armenian guerrillas. And when we look at internal parts of Anatolia, they were fighting in four different regions at those times. When we relate it to the PKK, we should go beyond that relationship, that correlation. Before Dersim, with Hoybun, some Kurdish leaders, 1935 in Syria and Aleppo and in Kamışlı gathered together. There are two hidden meetings, and in these hidden meetings there are some secret meetings and secret decisions taken, and all of these gun and weapon issues have been negotiated there. There is an Hatay issue between Hatay and France in Syria, and for this reason there were some attempts to create rebellious actions in Turkey. 1935 and 36, there is actually circular to the governors about the people who have changed their religions. Actually, there is a statistical study, and of course, there is the surname law, which was included. And how many Armenian people are living in which regions, and what are their surnames, what were their old names, and what are their new names. They have all been actually recorded. So there is a record of reverted people. Abdullah Öcalan is an Armenian origin person, and also Gülen is an Armenian origin person. And those people are still present and not so different than the pastime events. And actually, when we speak about PKK, Kurdish movement, we should not consider them as certain groups' actions. We should reconsider them and reevaluate them. United States is not supporting PYD just for the sake of their beauty. We should reconsider those facts. Everything is being done on a purpose, with an intention. How many Armenian origin people are living who are not having the Armenian identity but are Armenian in origin? It is not possible to have a clear-cut list of this, but when we look at the surnames, by changing the surnames, they have there is a group of people who have hide their actually origin. So we should consider this fact. I did not publish a study. I have a very serious study. 800, 900 people belonging to PKK have been listed by me. I know who are they. The games which are played among Turkey was present during the Ottoman Empire times. Süleyman Bey also mentioned that. Actually, the first moment was in 1880. It was not in 1880s. In 1878, for the very first time, they have established Karaharp community, and just like a Ku Klux Klan structure of United States, it was a racist group, and by the gunpowder, they were thinking they would be governing the society, and they were not even looking. They were not also in favor of Armenians. And also there are some hidden reports, secret reports of the Russian side, which were being ordered to be burned out after being read. And the Turkish, in our society, Turkish Historical Society, we have these reports, England and France, and their games played among Armenians and how they have used them is being explained. Russia should not be actually late. Katanzumi, when we consider all of these first president of Armenia, states the same things. We have believed in their lovely words, and we have considered the weak position of Ottoman Empire, and we have believed in their promises to establish the nation which they were promising us. We did not accept the proposal of Ottoman Empire, but we were disappointed. So he's not only actually assaulting the Ottoman Empire, accusing the Ottoman Empire. When you're living in a country, if your people are working for France and fighting for France, and according to the French documents, the British troops would be going to the land of Smyrna, Iskenderun, and 35,000 Armenian soldiers would be helping them. And the amount of weapon which would be allocated would be also mentioned. And Ottoman Empire was right in deportation. When we speak about genocide issue is totally different and cannot be related with deportation. And if they have a single proving evidence document in their hand related with genocide, they would be going to La Haye. Up until now, they would be discussing with us. Hirmart Kaiser did not come yesterday. No, he did not come. He gave up. He gave up. He gave up because he was telling me that I have proposed him to work together in Turkish Historical Society, and I would be giving him a 5,000 salary per month. Come and work with us. But he says that there is genocide. Then prove it. If you prove it, I'm going to publish it in my society's publication house. And he gave up because he told me that, he himself told me that, where did you find these documents? We are not able to find these documents. And I told him that you are seeking for genocide and we're searching for genocide. We are searching for Armenians, the real means of Armenians. This is the difference among us. According to the international law, if a state is taking the decision of deportation, relocation, if punishing them in their own courts, and 67 people have had the punishment of condemned to death, and those 67 people who are condemned to death, let me read you the records of the court from Yusuf Salinai's research. He states that the arrested person, fame, and name and the accommodation. Cherkezin Ahmed Recep from Syros. He killed the Armenian deported people, kidnapped them, and he was condemned to death for killing the deported Armenians. It was approved, and of course it was enacted. Mehmet Ali, as a second name, has kidnapped and also Armenian people, and he was condemned to death, and it was also enacted. The problem is as follows: if the states do not have judged those people and also condemn them to a punishment, we cannot name it, we cannot refer it and relate it with genocide. What are you going to say for the Syrian side? Exactly. Jackson states, the American consulate Jackson says there is no killing. There is a general circular of returning back. And according to this general decree, 600 people, 649,000 people have returned back, and it was approved by the Patriarch. In order to wrap up, I have some questions for you. Okay, these statistics are very complicated. According to our statistics, how many people have been deported, how many people have died, and how many people returned, and how many people gone abroad when we compare it with the other side's figures? There is such kind of a situation. For example, according to French figures, 500,000 people have been relocated. And when we consider American archives, 500,000 people have been relocated. And when we look at Ottoman Empire, encrypted records, 513,000. And when we look at Aleppo consulate of United States, in Jackson's declaration is 486,000 people have come to Aleppo. So 486,000. How many people have died? Let me mention. From Erzurum to Erzincan, as an attack of Kurdish guerrillas, 500 people have been massacred. And in the Diyarbakir region, a group of guerrillas have attacked the deportating groups, and 200 Armenians were killed. In Meskene region, 2,000 Armenians were killed by the Arabic tribes. So it is not beyond 100,000. And two groups, when they were going via Dersim, their situation was not clear. So 500 and 200, approximately 8,000 people were killed. Of course, Hikmet Özdemir has got a study and showing the fact that some people have died because of some certain diseases. 37,000 Armenians have died because of illnesses, as Justin McCarthy states. In the Eastern Anatolian region, we don't have any deportation. I mean, one region, Armenians were not deported because those Armenians were not being sent away. Those regions were invaded by the Russian side. They were moving, they were relocated to Caucasian regions. Some Armenians have died because of hunger. In Avrikele, 30,000 Armenians have died because of cholera.
Well, the diaspora articulates the number of 1 million. It's not possible because, I mean, even in the propaganda book it is stated that, I mean, the maximum 600,000 Armenians died. I mean, if you exaggerate the Armenian population to 2 million, I mean, even the recordings of the patriarch, the 2 million Armenians didn't exist. But as we are unlucky, as in the case of, Greeks, Orthodox, we don't have the recordings of baptism. I mean, if the Armenians and their recordings regarding to the baptism was registered, then we could have reached to the real numbers of the Armenians. I mean, how you take the memoirs of Baptisian seriously? I cannot take them seriously because from different documents, I mean, the population varies between 1 million to 1.9 million. Even in 1914, the Ottoman archives speak about 1 point almost 3 million Armenians. Let's assume that the Ottoman Empire counted them less, but it shouldn't be more than 100,000 more. I mean, there are Armenian public officers in the army. I mean, for example, grandmother was speaking about it. The Armenian officers in the army, how important it is. Well, it is important for one reason. They are exempt from the relocation and resettlement. This is one of the most important evidences that the ethnic cleansing was out of the picture. I mean, if you are doing ethnic cleansing, it's not understandable and comprehensible to keep the Armenian officers in your army. And I mean, 520 Armenians were working as translators in the army, even in the 1920s. So, I mean, the telegraph chair person was an Armenian, for example, in 1915. Some of the Armenians had been shot to death, as far as I know, certain officers. But I mean, if the treason is becoming clear, it doesn't matter whether you are Turk or Armenian, you will be shot to death. I mean, the martial laws are totally different. I mean, don't you think that the same is being implemented to, traitors in the other countries? I mean, if it is found that you are in treason, then you will be shot to death. In the French archives between 1914 and 1918, the Armenians who died as as a French soldier is all Ottoman Armenians, and they were wearing the French army uniforms. This is nothing but treason. There are Ottoman bureaucrats, for example, who stood against the relocation and resettlement, and they were murdered by the gangs, for example. Of course, they have been sentenced to death. What kind of statistics can we speak about those Ottoman bureaucrats who have been murdered and their perpetrators couldn't be found out? It is no big number, I have to say. It's 4 or 5 people. It's only 4 or 5 people. I'd like to make a contribution. What Yusuf says is really right. I mean, there is an official population count in the Ottoman Empire, but this official count for the last time has been carried out in 1922. Since we don't know the exact number of the Armenians, it is not possible for us to determine the exact casualties. I mean, those exaggerated casualties are depending on the exaggerated population counts. I mean, Lessius, for example, says 1.8 million was the casualty. Armenian Patriarch claims it was 2.2 million. They ask Lepsius, for example, how did you come up with 1.8 million? He says it's the average between the Ottoman, numbers and the Patriarch numbers. So he's just making up. I mean, for the first time, I don't remember, but there was a document dated 2nd of July 1915. And they said that it was 1 million even before the relocation to the Elazığ was initiated. In the Turkish Historical Society, you know, we have written a book about exile and migration. All numbers are presented there. What Murat Bardakçı actually published confuses the mind. So the Caucasian figures are included in that number of 924,000. I mean, at least 300 or 350,000 Armenians went to Caucasia. In the archives of the General Command of the Army, the figures and statistics have been published as well. I mean, let's assume that some of the Erzurum Armenians are deemed safe and secure, or let's assume that they are not deemed potential threats. They have been relocated in the Konya province, for example. So there are certain transfers between different cities as well. Well, Mr. Yusuf, our professors are tired already. There are many things to be discussed. I mean, in the future, we can discuss those issues again and again. I believe everybody is getting tired, but it was a very beneficial session. It was just like an archive study. Everybody will have a chance to listen to those speeches later on. And if you like, let's adjourn our session and our symposium as well. Okay, let's adjourn the session, but let me say one more sentence. We shouldn't condemn the West as they adopt the genocide, because there's a reason behind that. After 1918, the Frenchmen invaded Adana and Maraş provinces. There were the Armenians who immigrated to Syria and didn't turn back. They were, planted to those regions by the Frenchmen. And the France said that I will establish this kingdom of Klikya for the Armenians in the Adana. And that's why 3 troops of the French army is comprised of the Armenian volunteers. I was born in Kozanlı, for example, district of Adana, and they were burning people inside of, those furnaces. My grandfather, my aunt knew those events. My grandfather, for example, died in 1972. And I graduated from the university back then. And my uncle was wounded by the Armenians because I listened to those stories from them directly. So the Western world used the Armenians during the partitioning of the Ottoman lands. And Hrant, may God rest his soul, before he was assassinated, if you type Hrant Dink TV5, he stated that the ones who should apologize from us is the Frenchmen and the Englishmen who used us, he said, Hrant Dink. So what we should do is that we have a very bright self-consciousness. The political party in power should resolve this problem politically. They should actually, file a criminal case against Joseph Biden. And they should actually come to terms with the Syrians, and they should undersign the economic exclusive zone with the Syria. This will be the biggest impact on USA. Israel is the partner of Greece, and why in that case I shouldn't act in the same way? Then they will come to our doors in order to negotiate further. Let me say one more thing. In Cyprus or in the 12 islands, the Englishmen invaded Cyprus but they show respect to the foundation until 1913. But the lands belonging to foundations have been given to the Greeks, and we have such records. So the inherited of those lands should apply to the court for compensation and indemnification. If you are going for a compensation case, hundreds and millions of dollars will be given to those inherited ones. There are precedents in the European Court of Human Rights. These are the leverage that we have, and we should make use of them. Thank you very much, Professor, on behalf of our university. I mean, all those speeches are broadcasted online. It was open to public. We tired our professors. We would like to thank all of them. Our rector is with us. The head of the Turkish Historical Society is with us. Thank you all, professors. Mr. Beytullah, would you like to say one more thing? You contributed a lot. Well, what I would like to say is that we kindly request from our professors to share their texts that they presented with us. We will do our best to publish those texts in Turkish and English as well. So their texts will be ready for publication. First, we will give those texts to the head of Turkish Historical Society. We will try to publish this symposium as a book, and hopefully those presentations will be published both in Turkish and English. And we will be in contact with our professors to ask for their texts. Well, I would like to add one more thing. Once again, I would like to thank all my colleagues who participated in this session. Thank you so much for your words, for your speeches. I would like to thank our rector and the head of Turkish Historical Society. I would like to thank you, Mr. Tarık and Mr. Beytullah. Thank you so much for organizing this event. It was a beneficial symposium. The expert of the topic came together and discussed this issue. And this symposium also showed that there is a high level of knowledge about this issue in Turkey. And we have the colleagues who can carry out further studies. Hopefully, such kind of an opportunity will rise in the Turkish Historical Society. Hopefully, the relevant legislation will be amended, because I know that the Turkish Historical Society has bottlenecks, because I know that their budgets have been, allocated to the Ministry of Culture, but the Turkish Historical Society is independent. As a result, this budget that are being allocated to the Turkish Historical Society is not coming from the state. That's why, if the Turkish Historical Society can carry further studies, then the studies will be much more and highly reputational. So we should know the value of Turkish Historical Society. So our rector being in the first place, I would like to thank our head of the Turkish Historical Society. I know that the Turkish Historical Society will publish those speeches as a book. And since this is the hot topic, it will be no problem. So we should assign our speeches to translators to be translated. So we will seek the professional help. I listened to the English translation, by the way, and the English translation was perfect as well. So we would like to thank our interpreters as well. So we will seek for the professional help of our translators as we translate your speeches into English. So, of course, we will send back the English translations to our professors, so they will double check whether there is any problem with the translation as well. We can plan all those. But before we adjourn the session, I also specifically would like to thank our translators very much. I try to listen to the English translations, and they carry out a perfect simultaneous interpretation. Thank you so much to our translators. Mr. Tarık found them. They are professional interpreters, by the way. Thank them as well. Hopefully, in the upcoming period, we will seek for their help. All right, then. We wish all of you a wonderful day, and we would like to thank all of you once again. We adjourn the session. Take care.